I'm Roberta, welcome to my kitchen. Today we're making a flatbread from the island of Madeira. They really look like English muffins and they're very popular in Madeira and throughout Portugal as a bread to dunk into soups or stews, and sometimes even used for those prego rolls, the steak sandwiches, which we're going to make as well. Today we're going to make it to go with our clam and chorizo dish. Now the interesting thing about this flatbread is it's made with sweet potato. I've tried making it with the purple sweet potato. It's okay, it's a little dry and you need to add a little more water to compensate for that. It's also got a bit of a purpley grey colour. So I like these sweet potatoes that have an orange, not the kumara, not the bright orange, but just the pale orange flesh. So we're going to boil our sweet potato, and while that's happening I'm going to pop some yeast in some warm water to start proving. We'll combine our flour, our mashed sweet potato and our yeast and put that dough aside to rest for an hour or two. Now one of the other things I love about this dish is it's traditionally cooked on a stone griddle. I don't have a Madeiran stone griddle, but I do have this great Italian one that I brought back from Lombardy. So if you have anything like this, now's the chance to get it out. If you don't, a heavy based cast iron frying pan is the next best thing. You want a nice steady even heat because, as you'll see, we cook these little flat cakes for about 8 to 10 minutes, sometimes even a little bit longer. First thing we need to do is get our sweet potato on. Now because this is a dough, I want you to be precise with your sweet potato measurements. Sweet potatoes don't come in a standard size, but read the recipe. If there's excess, cut it off and just use the quantity that the recipe says. Let's get peeling. So I've weighed out my 225 grams of sweet potato before peeling it, cut off the little excess bit. I've peeled it, and now we just want to cut it up as small as possible so that it cooks quickly. Please be careful. I find these are really hard to cut. It's a bit like cutting a pumpkin where the knife can slip quite easily because they are quite hard. Into some water, a good tablespoon of salt because we want this bread to have some flavour, and the salt's going to do that, and we'll pop it on the stove. So while our potato's boiling, we'll get our yeast ready to do its thing. Might as well do it straight into the bowl in which we're going to make our dough. Sachet of yeast, 1/3 of a cup of warm water, not too hot but nice and warm to give it a good start, and by the time our potato's ready that should be nice and foamy. So our yeast has had time to get nice and foamy, our sweet potatoes cooked, and time for my favourite gadget. You've seen me use these before. I just think they're such a good way to mash potatoes, sweet potato, any sort of veggies while they're still hot, which is great, really essential for gnocchi, and I think great for this. Rather than having it cool down, I want all the water that's in there to stay, not too much to drain off. I want it nice and moist to go into our dough. So you can mash it, just get a potato masher out and mash it up in a pot, but don't leave it sit around for too long. There we go. In it goes. Squish, squish, squish. Look at that. Little worms. That's another thing I love this for, making Swiss vermicelle dessert with chestnut puree. Now when you lift it out, you're going to get all those bits, so make sure they go in there as well. Don't worry about getting your hands dirty because in a second you're going to dive in there with your hands anyway. Right, there we go. Pop that there. Let me just get rid of this. In with our flour. This is one where I don't feel you need to sift the flour, and then just in there with your hand to give it a good mix around, and in a minute we'll get it out onto the board and give it a good knead. So when it's almost completely come together like that, you can pop it out onto the board. You can pop the rest out here because I find it easier to mix once it's out. And then we're going to get in there with both hands. And it feels a bit dry at first, that's fine. You'll find that it becomes quite a lovely soft dough quite quickly once you're kneading it. Every batch of flour is different. Every batch of sweet potato is different. So if you do find that it's too dry, just wet your hand and then go back to kneading. Don't try pouring any more water onto it because it's too easy to add too much. But just a damp hand is sometimes all that's needed if a dough is a little bit too dry. And you can see that's quite soft now. That's come together quite well. There's a few little flecks of orange of sweet potato that haven't mashed up properly. It doesn't matter if there's a couple left, but mostly they're going to disappear with a few minutes kneading. And we just want to work that gluten and make sure everything's really well mixed before we set it aside to rest. Now, how long are we going to rest it for? There's differing opinions. I have a dear friend, Sandro, who lives in Lisbon and did live in Madeira for many years, and he was actually the person who introduced me to this bread. Now, he insists it needs to rest for 3 hours the first time around. I'm sorry, Sandro, because I know you're going to see this, but I tested both and I didn't find much difference. Now, obviously with yeasted doughs, longer is better, so if you've got 3 hours, do it for 3 hours. But if you've only got 1 hour, don't let that stop you, okay? So there we go. That's as soft and well kneaded as I need it to be. It's no longer sticky. We're going to pop that in a bowl, dust the bowl with a little bit of flour, set it aside for at least an hour. If Sandro's watching, maybe 3. And then we'll see where we're up to. The important thing is we want to see it double in size. So after a couple of hours, let's split the difference and call it 2. Our dough's risen up quite well. I usually just cover it with a cloth and pop it in the sunniest spot in the kitchen, which is usually in the middle of the floor. Now, it's stuck a little bit, that's okay. Let's get it out. It's going to stick to my hands a little bit. I might need to dust them with a little flour. Some days it's sticky, some days it's not. And yeah, I'm going to get a little bit of flour to put on that board. So here we go, a little bit of flour. Definitely not too much, but just enough, and maybe a little bit on my hands that I can handle it without it going crazy. Okay, so you see I have my trusty scales here. Because we're making 8, you can just use your eye and break it in half 3 times. But if you want to, you can weigh it and work out what weight each of your balls should be. I'll give you artistic license, it's up to you. So generally they want to be about 70 grams each. I'm going to get rid of the scales and do it by eye. So there we go, there's our 4 balls. That really is stickier than usual today. It just goes to show you that every batch of dough is different. And in half again, and each of these in half again, and then we're going to have 8 balls to work with. So before we put them aside to prove for a second time, we want to make them into nice neat little balls, and the way we do that is just to keep tucking the dough underneath until we have a smooth ball like that. Then we flatten the bottom, give it a bit of a roll, and we're going to pop it onto a flour dusted tray. So after about an hour, our bolo are nicely rested. They're still a bit sticky, but that may or may not happen to you. We're now going to pop them on the grill and cook them. Let's go to the stove. So I have my stone grill nice and hot. If you don't have a stone grill, you're going to use a cast iron frying pan, something like that. Just want to flatten out our bolo to the, as I said, they look roughly like an English muffin, and we pop them on 2 or 3 at a time depending what will fit. So after a minute or so you can see they've puffed up a bit, so we're just going to flatten them down again, let them cook for a few more minutes, and then we'll turn them over. So we want to turn them over every couple of minutes just to help them cook evenly all the way through, as well as on both sides. So there we are. After 10-12 minutes They're nicely browned all over and ready to be smeared in garlic butter. So here we are, our Bolo do Caco, sweet flatbreads from Madeira, ready to be split open. Love that steam. And we're going to serve these with our clams and chorizo, but traditionally they'd be slathered with some garlic and parsley butter like that and devoured. Enjoy, and remember, please hit the like button on the YouTube video.